She was seeking new experiences, new emotions. She betrayed me. I was shocked and devastated. So I planned revenge, and they got what they deserved. The morning was disorganized as a power outage overnight caused our alarm clock to not turn on. This meant my wife and I had to dash to get ready for work. Since my employment begins at 10:00 a.m., she was more in a hurry than I was. And from our place, the journey takes 25 minutes. Usually checking her email before leaving for work, my wife was in such a hurry she neglected to turn off her computer. Curiosity got the better of me as I was about to turn it off and opened an email she had received several days ago under the subject line. Cheers to an amazing adventure. My wife was planning a trip to Italy with another man while I would be away on a 5-day corporate trip. I was shocked and depressed about this disclosure. Allow me to set some backdrop. Mutual friends over 15 years ago introduced Julia, my wife, and me. They thought we would click. As it happens, both of us appreciated a good lifestyle and physical condition. While I aimed for development in finance at a modest investment business, Julia worked as a Pilates teacher and health coach. Often participating in rock climbing, kayaking, and jogging, I enjoy the great outdoors. As a pair, we looked great and had many the same interests. Julia has long auburn hair, green eyes, and a pleasing physique. She is 5'4". I have an athletic body, gray eyes, brown hair, and stand at 6'1". Was it at first sight love? No, but we became close and then started a romantic relationship. Though it took almost 3 years, we finally tied the knot, and I thought we were content until today. But after reading this email, I understood our marriage was under great difficulty. Apparently, despite knowing about my forthcoming business trip, a major chance for me and the company, Julia and this man, Michael, had been subtly organizing a romantic retreat for some time already. She proceeded with it. I was preparing for a 5-day business trip with several colleagues to guarantee big deals. Now all I could concentrate on was this email in front of me, even if landing these agreements may mean a promotion and a sizable salary boost. To find more about this Michael, I began poring over her previous emails. She had, conveniently, kept all of their letters orderly under getaways, right? Julia isn't tech savvy, but I am on computers all the time, so browsing through her emails came naturally. She obviously had 7 months of involvement with this man. But why? There were no clear indicators of dissatisfaction around. Our personal lives was fantastic, and we loved one another. She entered the arms of another guy for what? Though I had to go to work, my brain was whirling. I made careful to copy every email onto a USB drive before leaving so I could review them later and maybe learn more about Michael and the reason she did this. I turned off her computer and hurried off to work, lost in ideas about her and Michael. Anger erupted within me as I worked through the shock of this disclosure, and I yearned grand-scale retribution. Usually I'm not one for violence or retribution, but in this case it was different. Her treachery could not be forgiven. Though I considered when and where it all started momentarily, I determined it made no difference. I wanted to know more about Michael and how I may bring his life terrible misery. Though the idea crossed my thoughts, I did not wish harm on him. Rather, I wanted them both to go through a somewhat public humiliation. I still have to be cautious, however, in planning. Having 8 weeks ahead, I locked my office door at work and started to think. More information about Michael and the details of their journey would help. Then it occurred to me how she couldn't hide her affair and how I might undermine their intentions. Though it was a risky strategy, I was resolved to let her confront the results show. I did some actual work over the day, but my thoughts kept returning to my plan. I lingered behind in my office for over 2 hours, noting what I needed and how to acquire it, when it was time to depart. I also highlighted the hazards in my strategy. Should things go south or I find myself caught, it might indicate major trouble, possibly even incarceration. I was ready to gamble, however. I knew I needed access to Julia's email and computer if I was to compile further information on Michael. Though I thought about installing programs to break her passwords, I soon saw it may create a digital record. I had to be cautious if I wanted to pull off without being discovered. I therefore had to figure out how to obtain what I need without leaving any trail back to myself. I paid with cash, purchased several throwaway mobile phones from many outlets, and picked a tiny laptop I could use at locations with free Wi-Fi over the following few days. This means my behavior could not be linked to my house or place of employment. Hoping to capture her taking this man into our bed for some adulterous pleasure, I also bought many wireless video cameras and bugs to surround the home. Though maybe they would discuss their forthcoming trip, providing me the information I need for my strategy, the prospect made my blood run cold. I did my best to behave normally around my wife over time, so she wouldn't assume I knew about her affair. Though it was difficult, after a few weeks faking grew natural. Though silently furious at the idea of her being with another man, I would smile gently at her. I suppose I missed my natural calling as an actress. Using one of the throwaway phones I had, I contacted several old pals during this period to make sure there would be no link back off to me. My first call to a college friend I hadn't talked to in more than 16 years back then. Brad was a genuine party animal, the man to go for a fun evening. "Hey Brad, guy, how have you been?" Brad initially didn't remember me, but it all clicked for him after some thought back on our college parties. "Hey Luke? Yep. Right now everything is returning to me. Those were some fantastic years, huh? Recent activities have you been involved in?" I filled him in fast on what I had been doing since college. Though things hadn't exactly turned out the way he had intended, he said he was hanging in there. What then is the rationale for this call? It was more than simply remembering I advised meeting personally, as I had to be careful to raise the actual problem. "Look, I felt you could be the man for the job and I need some assistance. Could we maybe have lunch and discuss it?" He paused for a bit, then nodded. "Sure thing. Anything for a former college mate." For a few days later, we scheduled a meeting near to his, but distant from my office. Time was running out, so I was especially depending on his assistance and had nowhere else to turn to. Thinking those were the areas they would most likely be talking and doing other things, I also placed up cameras and bugs in the bedroom and living room. The recordings indicated nothing noteworthy after the first week. Given it would be less dangerous for their affairs, I began to consider if they were meeting at his house. But the next week presented another picture. She seems to have brought Michael over to our house one late morning, and they spent more than 3 hours in every conceivable position being intimate. Watching it sickened me, but I had to go through it to see whether they mentioned their vacation or exposed any pertinent information. They did not, however. I checked the cameras once again the next week. They were back, but not for intimacy. They just mentioned their forthcoming vacation, which provided the information I required: the flight number and departure date. Listening in, I could hear my wife's enthusiastic planning voice. Even thinking hurting them, I was beyond enraged. I put the idea away. I wanted them both to be long-term sufferers. Even now in their graves, this retribution would follow them for lifetime. I dreamed of a day when my gray, elderly, soon-to-be ex-wife lay on her deathbed and I would walk in smiling and bend over to tell her how I had spoiled her Italy vacation. I would get up, smile at her as she stared at me shocked, then turn and go. Now, more driven than ever to achieve, I still had one dangerous chore to do. At last I knew more about Michael. The same fitness club employs him and my wife as wellness trainers. He does, it turns out, have a tendency of seeking other men as spouses, but that's about to change. I decided to undertake some surveillance because he lived near the little townhouse development containing the fitness facility. Telling my supervisor I had personal affairs to take care of before our business vacation, I took a day off from work. I watched his whereabouts for many hours using a digital camera with strong magnification. The 3-bedroom unit was simple, and it seemed his neighbors were out during the day for business without any security cameras visible. For my secret intentions, this worked well. I worried about what I had to ask Brad at our meeting. Although it was the riskiest component of my scheme, it would be well worth it if I could achieve what I need. I gestured Brad over to the table where he could find when I saw him walking into the restaurant. I had a seat. Tucked in the rear, the area was somewhat peaceful, and just a small number of patrons had late lunch. He welcomed me with a laid-back, "Long time no see, bro." I wasted no time and went right to the point as he came closer. Brad looked worse for wear than he could have been an extra on a zombie show. I wanted to make it short. Should he not be able to help me, I would have to go elsewhere. We spoke about our college years and the great parties Brad had. Back then, he was somewhat the party animal, but it seems to have worn him down. At least 17 years older than his real age, he seemed much more ancient. I had to go right to the point, so I asked him straight why I had invited him to see if he or someone he knew could help me secure some party favors for a private event I was arranging. I inquired if he could help me and gave him a list. I promised he would be paid for his assistance. Brad looked over the list, first startled, then smiled. Saying it sounded like an interesting party, he readily volunteered to assist. He even inquired if he may invite an old college mate. Relieved, I agreed as long as he could collect the list things for me. Once he got everything, I would tell him the specifics for the celebration. Brad asked for advance money to buy the goods, so I offered him an envelope containing several thousand. He noted the size of the gathering and verified the cash was more than enough. We set up to meet for the trade next week, and I provided him my new mobile phone number in case of problems. Everything settled, then we departed the restaurant. Everything had to go since my wife and her boyfriend were scheduled to leave the day I departed for my vacation. I saw Brad 3 weeks before I left, and he was able to get everything I needed. All I had to do was conceal these things until the moment was just right. I left work early 5 days before my vacation to check on her packed bag. All ready for her journey, the cheater woman? I tucked a few surprises gently into her purse as a farewell present. I wasn't trying for her to find them anyhow. I took care to conceal them properly so she wouldn't find them when packing or unpacking. Then I started another dangerous move, invading Michael S. territory. That was not an issue because I understood his work schedule. I had never, however, tried anything like this before. I learnt from a book I came onto online and purchased a set of lockpicks. Online buying is incredible what you can get. I developed really good skills in practicing on many locks both at home and at work. Feeling confident, I informed my manager I wanted a longer lunch break and left Michael S. townhouse carrying my lockpick kit. Having little over 2 minutes to pick the lock and enter his house, I was amazed at how fast I managed. I concentrated on speed as I wanted to follow my strategy quickly and leave no trace. Wearing rubber gloves, I went directly to his bedroom and saw his packed travel suitcase ready. To make their vacation unforgettable, I included some travel presents in his bag, just as I did with my wife's luggage. I then discovered a container of tea in the kitchen. To ensure everything appeared undisturbed, I dumped the tea into a mixing bowl, placed some packets at the bottom of the jar, refilled it with tea, and then put it back where I found it. Everything was in order, so I left Michael S. house and came home. Still, I needed one more item done. A few days before my trip, I asked an acquaintance whose relative worked with airport security. Now it was about transmitting this information to the proper person without disclosing its source. I had all the specifics concerning my wife's and Michael S. travel. I therefore got in touch with a buddy, but had to be cautious about how I mentioned where I found the material. "Jake, I need a favor, but keep this information private," I added. I handed Michael his travel information and his name, but omitted mentioning my wife. Jake decided to let his cousin quietly pass it on. To further complicate Julia's problems, I also deleted all the cameras and bugs so no one could discover them, and put some surprises in her vehicle. I choose to have some fun at my wife's expense the day before my vacation. I sat down looking unhappy when I came home from work. Noticing, my wife inquired, "What's wrong?" "Something dropped off at the office today." Indeed, the customers we were scheduled to see canceled the appointments hence. Now I want to be flying on that trip, and the firm is losing a great chance for expansion. Her expression was showing amazement and concern. It dawned on me then she was most likely plotting to clear the path, so Michael and she could have their Italy escape free from interference. Can't they still forward you and attempt to settle issues with those clients? On this project, you and your group have invested a great deal of time and energy. Trying to guilt-trip me, she remarked. It would be a terrible pity to have all that effort go to waste. I became enraged about it. Given none, how could she discuss shame? Michael and she were ready to make big-time payments. "Just joking, honey." I laughed and comforted her. "The vacation is still on, not to worry." Relief rushed over her face and she smiled. "You had me headed there for a second. Are all of you then packed?" "Yeah, just had to chuck a few things in my carry-on, and I am set to go." "Will you not miss me too much while I am away? Are you scheduled, maybe for a girl-ass night out or something?" "Nothing like that, not at all," she answered. "I will just be here waiting for my dear hubby to come back." I nearly laughed out loud at that, God, but I was too furious. My wife dropped me off at the airport the next day. She drove. My hands stroking her exquisite face, I kissed her long, passionately. I wanted it to be unforgettable, because it would be the final kiss I would have ever given her. I followed the others, and we got on the aircraft. The trip was flawless after we arrived and booked into the hotel. I phoned home from the hotel room phone. Nobody picked up, So I left a note saying, "Honey, I did something foolish. I left my phone in the taxi and wanted to be able to reach you until I get either a new one or get it back." I hadn't really forgotten my phone. I simply needed a cover not to answer her calls. "If you need me, leave a note at the front desk, and I'll contact you later." The following day came up, and I made sure to turn off my phone to avoid bothering anybody during my client meeting. When I returned to my hotel room, I looked for messages, but found none thus. I switched on my phone and discovered nothing from my wife or anybody else. Perhaps they passed airport security as well. The next day, the meetings went even better than the preceding ones, and we got back to the hotel early. On the hotel room phone, there were many messages waiting for me, one from my wife, another from her mother, and a third from a customs official. These made me grin. Then I checked my mobile phone and saw many texts waiting for me. I listened on the motel phone at the messages. First from my wife, she was weeping and said, "Honey, it's me. I urgently need you. I am in great danger. Please come home right now." All I heard thereafter was weeping. My soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law sent the following note. "Luke, your wife has been attempting to get in contact with you. She needs you home immediately as she has been arrested." The last note was from a customs official called Carter. "Please phone me when you have a moment." Identifying himself as Agent Carter, he wanted to talk about the narcotics charge arrest of my wife. He included some more information and his phone number. Though I was delighted and kept smiling, I had to keep a professional distance from my coworkers. So far, everything had gone according to schedule. However, I still had to seem astonished and surprised to prevent suspicion about my involvement. I told my supervisor of a major family problem without details the next morning. Although he agreed to allow me briefly leave the meetings to address an issue, he underlined the need of getting back right away to close agreements with the customers. After catching the first flight home, I contacted my mother-in-law using my missing mobile phone when she landed. "What's going here? Though I find it hard to believe, I got your message. Julia was taken into custody on drug-related allegations? She never uses drugs or alcohol. Was this happening in the exercise center?" I knew exactly where the event happened. Her mother answered softly, seeming ashamed. "No, she was traveling with a friend to Italy, and they were stopped at security, where they found some illegal things on her and her friend." "Just hang on just a second. She informed me she had no plans and she was going to be home. With whom was this acquaintance traveling to Italy?" I said, "I bet one of her girlfriends spoke her into going and got her into all this mess." Her mother paused for a second. I understood it was with someone else. "Luke, the crucial thing to keep in mind here is that she needs your aid and is in peril. She loved you, and I know you loved her too." I cut her off. "What aren't you sharing with me, Mom?" "She was carrying with her who?" Feeling just too pleased, I screamed into the phone. Silence followed. Then she cleared her throat. "She was traveling with Michael, a male. She acknowledged he has also been arrested." I once again cut her off. "So while I was out working hard to make a livelihood, your daughter, my wife, was going off to Italy with another guy, and she gets nabbed for drug possession? You are guiding me toward what?" I demanded. She said, "Yes, I'm afraid that says what you're telling me." I stopped quite slowly. "Okay, I have to speak with her lawyer first, then this customs agent. After that, I will speak with her. We'll see what happens next, but she better have a very excellent reason for why she was preparing to travel to Italy with another guy and had narcotics with her." I hung on her mother before she answered. I started playing back over 30 mails I saw were waiting when I came home. The first one concerned losing my mobile phone and was personal. The following few were from Julia. She hoped I would review our communications during my work trip. Her mother sent many. The rest came from her attorney and asked me to get in contact right away. I phoned the attorney, who was in TT in the office at the time, and scheduled an appointment for the next morning. I then agreed to see Agent Carter at his office located downtown later that afternoon after phoning him. Trying to consider if I had hidden my traces so none of this could come back to me, I hurriedly got washed and left. Soon, I was in what I could only guess was an interrogation room. Agent Carter arrived holding a file. "Good you could stop by to see me," he remarked. Looking at something in the file, he remarked, "I have some questions about your wife that I was hoping you could answer. Listen, my wife is not drug user. She has never taken anything unlawful as far as I know. She honestly seldom drinks at all. This has to be a mistake or a great misinterpretation." She calls out loud in Pilates, Why would she engage in illicit behavior? Agent Carter did not glance up as I was attempting to behave somewhat. People make all kinds of poor decisions for all kinds of poor motives. Did you know then that your wife was off to Italy with Michael? Michael says they were headed for a romantic retreat, but she informed us he was just friends. Michael then, do you know? You knew your wife was having an affair? About the medicines, what did you know? He was now fixed squarely on me. I drew a long breath to calm myself. I still find it hard, even though I never knew any of this until I spoke with my mother-in-law this morning. She had to be controlled into this. I had to tread cautiously, as she is too fine of a person to let get confused in anything like this. I thought this man could recognize a liar straight away. Well, I suppose you were uninformed. Hate to break it to you, friend, but your wife was having drug dealer of all kinds affair on you. Already looking at his property, we discovered even more narcotics. Soon, we will be looking at your house as well. Either you comply and allow us in, or we will just acquire a search warrant. I knew her lawyer would counsel against it, but this was about protecting myself, and it would appear better if I wasn't not attempting to conceal anything. So I consented, even though either way we would be inspecting your apartment shortly. Soon I was back at the home sifting over everything with scores of customs inspectors and a few of their dogs. They picked a few items, including several medical cabinets she kept filled with containers. I told Julia's lawyer about my conversation with Carter and the search the next day at our appointment. He wasn't too happy. Got it? If you are contacted by any law enforcement, I want to be there before you say anything. I nodded with annoyance. Let me be clear, I am curious in everything that preceded the arrest of my wife. She was preparing to travel to Italy with Michael, all I knew. Someone should start outlining how this transpired if any of you wants my assistance. Do I define myself clearly? He said, I can discuss your wife's case with you. I started to walk out at that. I then went to the prison holding her and asked to visit her. She arrived in a room filled with other prisoners meeting with family or attorneys at circular metal tables, strapped to stools, wearing an orange prison uniform. No makeup. Her hair tied back into a tight, unkempt ponytail. She looked worn out, as like she hadn't slept for days. She said, "Oh, honey, I am so relieved you're here." She cried. I was about to give her a hug when a security stepped in and said there would be no physical contact. This only made her weep more intensely. It's as good, honey. We'll sort this thing out. I have to hear your side of the story right now. How did you come to be planning to go to Italy with this guy? I said softly. Her tears came on more often. Luke, I am very sorry. I am really sorry. So it is true? You were seeing Michael, a heroin dealer, an affair with this man. How do you, not delighted with me then? Not only do you adore me, simply spoken, I find it incomprehensible him, you, and the drugs. Your thought was what? Knowing she lacked a response, I stopped. Please trust me when I say I have always loved you. Are you ready to pardon me? She begged to see me. I gave her some time before speaking out. I might have forgiven you, but you destroyed my heart totally, so I cannot forgive you. I am changing all the locks on the home and seeing a divorce attorney when I leave here. I want to completely wipe any trace of you from my house. Hence, I am forwarding all your material to your parents' house. Right now, you are not in my life. I desire nothing involving you. Tell your attorney also not to call me a character witness, as I will not speak well of you. Goodbye, Julia. I hope you the best. Saying she needed me, she was crying and begging for me to remain. I walked home and started packing her stuff without looking back. I contacted a locksmith to replace all the locks the next day. Then I set up a security firm to install a premium system the next week. I had most of her stuff packed and ready to be shipped to her parents in a few days. Julia called me multiple times, but I turned off all of them as I had no desire to speak with her. I returned to work at last, and we signed those significant customers we had been after. This resulted in both a pay rise and a promotion. Divorcing Julia was simple. It was a straight split with no spousal support, and she had to pay her legal bills from her drug charge. Though she tried to get in touch, I wanted to maintain my distance. Overwhelming evidence convinced her not to go to trial. Her lawyer encouraged her to accept a plea agreement for a reduced term. She disapproved. Michael, on the other hand, battled valiantly to establish his innocence, only to be sentenced 18 years. Julia received 8 years. Julia wanted to see me one more time before heading to court. It was her day of sentence. I agreed, and 1 hour before her court visit, we met at her attorney's office. Looking at me, she seemed weary. Luke, I just wanted you to know Michael meant nothing to me. I always loved you and will adore you going forward. I really regret hurting you in this way. This was not expected to be the outcome. Someday I hope you will forgive me, nearly in tears once again. Julia, I have to know one thing. You did this for what reason? Bored you? In bed? Did I not fulfill you? Was it the excitement of knowing you had done something illegal and got away? Why did you act in this way and sour our marriage? I asked, sad as it is. She turned to face me. I really have no idea why. Perhaps it was the thrill of acting against norms. I think you didn't love me sufficiently, or else you would not have done. I have always loved you, however. Julia, I want this to be the last time I have to cope with you. I wish never to see or hear from you ever again. Since you sought thrills, I want you to spend your time in jail, considering what you have lost. Once those women see you, you will have some exciting adventures there. She started weeping once again, but this time out of terror. The business expanded over the following few years, and I ascended to rank senior partner. We grew, building an office in Los Angeles, and I was chosen to run it. This entailed relocating to LA, selling my home, and finding an apartment. I have a couple letters here from Julia early on, but I returned them closed without opening them. That phase of my life was ending, and I was ready to advance. 10 years have gone by already, and LA has been satisfactory. I am single right now, and LA's dating scene is treating me nicely. Every several months I have been courting another lady. Once was more than enough. I have no desire in getting married again and running the danger of betrayal. My assistant Paige walked in after I answered a call from the lobby while seated in my office. There's a woman downstairs that wants to talk with you, she continued. Julia, she says, is her name. I stopped briefly and then instructed her to send Julia up, but to have 2 security officers close by. Paige also assigned me something to do. I scribbled it down and gave it to her. Call me few minutes after you bring her in, I replied. Paige grinned and read what I had written. 2 minutes later, Julia arrived in my office. She appeared at least 15 years older and had acquired some weight, not in a pleasing manner. Her once gorgeous long red hair was lifeless and showing some gray. Under her sad-looking eyes, I saw bags. Her wardrobe appeared a little out of current, yet it was elegant and conservative. Feeling nothing, I stared at her. Not even pity, I was only emotionally empty. No love, no hatred. What then drives you here, Julia? Luke, I was meant to speak to you. I became driven to tell someone what occurred to me. To be honest, I knew nothing about the narcotics. I still find out how they got in my baggage. Michael most certainly slipped them in without my knowing. I never have been and am not into drugs. Julia begged me, so please trust me. Julia, you made our entire relationship a lie and wrecked our marriage for an affair. Why ought I to believe you now? Why did you search especially for me to tell me another lie? You fail to understand. I adore you, that is still true. We should once again be united. I want to put things right. My desk phone rang at just then, and I turned it on speaker. Indeed, Paige, what is going on? Samantha contacted to let her know you should get 6 tickets for the gala, as her parents are coming into town and would like to see you. I also wanted to bring her mother a dozen flowers, so find out where her parents are staying. I hung up the phone and turned back at Julia. You were stating something here. Julia started to cry at about here. Samantha is someone else. Oh, she's simply someone I have seen recently. You are not here, however, to discuss my dating life. You brought out your still felt emotions for me. Although I value it, I want to be clear. I feel different about you now. Ultimately, your mother told me about your incarceration and your intended trip to Italy with Michael. I stopped with our relationship after your infidelity came to light. Please depart now. I wish not to see you once again. Are you clear-minded? I paid great attention, but I had nothing to do with the medicines they came across. I had a frame. Enough with your falsehoods, Julia. You lied now, and you cheated on me previously. Kindly go and do not return. I have advised security to have you arrested should you be returning. You understand? She nodded while she was secretly weeping. I walked her to the door, and the security guards followed her out. Paige arrived shortly after. What then was it all about? Oh, it was simply me bidding farewell to a chapter of my life.